Um, Inflation is accelerating our addiction to what they call fossil fuels. Um, Biden's agenda can break this. Um, Hold on a second here. Um, Now, but basically, inflation is accelerated by addiction to fossil fuels, but Biden's agenda can break that dependency. Um, President Joe Biden hadn't even signed the bipartisan infrastructure bill yet. When the centrist closet Republican Senator Joe Manchin of West Virginia found an excuse to start reneging on his agreement to vote for the Build Back Better plan. Having already torn up the previous agreement to pass both bills at once, the closet Republican Manchin, whose bad faith is boundless, suddenly discovered a bunch of concerns. Um, with the social spending bill that he already forced the White House to cut in half, with phony promises that he would support it, which we knew he wouldn't. His latest excuse to delay the Build Back Better plan dies completely. And what's his excuse? Inflation. The closet Republican Senator Joe Manchin from West Virginia, whose vote, like that of the 49 other Senate Democrats, is key to enacting Biden's social spending bill, and he cited the rising inflation as a reason to pause on some parts of the White House's agenda. The Washington Post reported last week they cited a swarmy statement by Manchin about how from the grocery store to the gas pump, Americans know the inflation tax is real. Gas pump. What is it that you say about gas pumps? Because yes, it is true that gas pumps are primary cause of inflation. Our society is so oil dependent that a rise in gas prices typically drives up the cost of consumer goods. And this was true back in the 1970s, but when rapidly rising oil prices drove record inflation, and it's true now. On the same day that the closet Republican Manchin was complaining about inflation, the Washington Post also reported that the main driver of the wave of inflation besetting the country is the price of energy. Gasoline in particular is skyrocketing, and demand for energy from motorists, truckers, airlines, shipping lines, manufacturers had rebounded from the pandemic slump much more quickly than production had been able to recover. Too many people competing for a limited supply of oil. Gosh, it seems like the one way to keep that from happening is to reduce the demand for oil, and by moving more people towards cleaner forms of energy. And this just so happens to be a huge part of the Build Back Better bill. And yes, even the much smaller one that Manchin negotiated and then started to make up excuses not to vote for. Now the bill that the closet Republican Manchin supported before he started backpedaling would have invested $300 billion on clean energy investment and deployment, and it would improve energy efficiency and encourage real coal electrification. And it would also focus on high-speed rail projects that would reduce reliance on higher emission cars and planes. And it would have granted programs to integrate low carbon materials into transportation projects and develop low emission aviation fuels and technology. And it would move people to more fuel efficient or electronic cars, while also weatherizing homes and buildings to reduce energy use. Now, all of these measures are primarily meant to reduce carbon emissions, but a nice side benefit is that it reduces consumer demand for fossil fuels, and it can help therefore protect against inflation. Increasing the share of clean energy in the economy is therefore likely to further moderate rather than exacerbate inflationary swings, and this is what Richard Knoll explains in a piece for Barron. That's because clean energy technologies such as wind farms or solar panels do not rely on traditional fuels of the inelastic supply and demand like oil and gas to operate. As Trevor Higgins of Center for American Progress explains, indeed, investing in clean energy would directly reduce household energy costs by an average of $500 per year, and it would protect the economy from volatile fossil fuel markets and slow the pace of climate disruption. The economic analysis is great, but there's also common sense here too, which a lot of the Republicans don't have. When people complain about how much it takes to fill up their cars, shouldn't the immediate answer be that we need fewer people filling up cars in the first place? Everyone knows that fossil fuels are a grotesque addiction that Americans would be better off kicking, both for the planet and for their pocketbooks. But every time there's an effort to move towards a more sensible system that does less damage, people like the closet Republican Joe Manchin step in with their bad faith arguments like inflation, and they stop the changes. And Manchin likes to pretend it's because he's looking out for his constituents, but he's not. But they would also benefit from lower and more stable energy costs and transitioning to green jobs instead of the slowly collapsing coal industry. No, the sad reality is that Joe Manchin's obstinance, like so many obstacles to progress in our society, goes back to old-fashioned corruption. And Manchin is heavily invested and supported by the fossil fuel industry, and indeed has become quite a wealthy man from dirty fuel. There's no doubt there's no doubt that why he doesn't bother to come up with coherent arguments against even the mildest policy efforts to reduce American reliance on oil and gas. For instance, he's trying to remove a tax incentive from the Build Back Better that would reward automakers who produce the electric and hybrid cars with the union labor. His excuse is we shouldn't use everyone's tax dollars to pick winners and losers, and this is perhaps a land speed record in both swarm and bad faith. Manchin absolutely wants to use tax dollars to pick winners and losers. He just wants the winners to be corporate lobbyists, such as those from Toyota who have been pressuring Manchin to come out against the tax credit. The American people desperately need to see tax dollars geared towards protecting them against the climate change, against anti-work policies, and against the vagaries of an oil-dependent economy. Inflation sucks ass. Now, there's no use in denying it, and Democrats sound out of touch when they try to wiggle around the issue. That doesn't basically mean that Biden and the majority of his party have to accept this nonsense narrative that Build Back Better would contribute to inflation, because even the inflation hawk Larry Summers admits that it wouldn't. On the contrary, there's a lot in that bill that could help stabilize the economy. At the top of the list is the clean energy investments. Democrats need to be out front and about how fighting climate change and fighting inflation are the same fight, and not let the oil-corrupted politicians like the closet Republican Manchin imply otherwise. And if you like the video, give the video a like and subscribe to my channel, RBW King, and also hit the notification bell so that you'll be notified when a new video comes out, and thanks for listening.